Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to welcome everybody this evening for our April Fool's Day broadcast. Nothing is intentionally a joke tonight. I cannot say unintentionally. So, do I have any opening comments, public comment from the board this evening? I just have two announcements. The first is from the Lunenburg Public Schools, from the superintendent, saying that Wednesday, April 2nd, tomorrow, is World Autism Awareness Day, that 1 in 68 American children lives with autism. Please join the Lunenburg Public Schools in showing your support for students with autism and their families by wearing Lunenburg blue this Wednesday. And you can find out more about autism, if you would like, from www.autismspeaks.org. Second, I want to thank the Friends of the Public Library and the library organization for hosting a really splendid concert on Sunday from a Scandinavian singing group called, I'm going to mess it up, I think it's Staumgarten is what the name was. But anyway, it was predominantly Swedish music, but also had some Danish music, Finnish music, and Icelandic music. It filled, the whole room was filled. There was probably about 100, close to 100 people in that room, and they sang for 2 hours. It was absolutely fabulous and a great cultural event. And it's one of the events in their cultural series. If they're all like this, and many of them have been because I've been to them in the past, it really was wonderful, and I encourage people to go to the next one and look at their website for next events sponsored by them. So thank you. Okay, at 7 o'clock we have, do we have any public comment from the public this evening first? Hearing none. We will go right to our appointment, 7 p.m. for a peddler's license for Stephen Gravel, doing business as Vivant Solar. If you would come to the front here and introduce yourself and what you are applying for and what your peddler's license, what you will be peddling.
All right, I'm Stephen Gravel, work for Vivant Solar, and we're working with the Mass Green Communities Act, which is a mandate from the state of Massachusetts to try to get 35% of the power into the grid through green energy. That would be solar and wind. So Vivint is working in the area trying to qualify homes for this program that is subsidized by Massachusetts, Unitil, and Vivint.
Can you tell what the strategy would be? I'm assuming you're going to go door to door.
I do a lot of leads and referrals, but if I do see a home that qualifies, I want to be able to, like the neighbors, as I'm putting in a project, be able to approach the door and ask them if they're interested in being part of the program.
Okay. And what hours would you be doing this?
I do it usually between 10 and 6.
And what days of the week?
Monday through Saturday. Monday through Saturday.
Okay. Before I open it up to the board, has the application been satisfied, Madam Town Manager?
The application is complete and a query check has been performed.
Okay. Any questions that anybody has for the applicant? If there are no questions, then I would entertain a motion on the application.
I would make a motion to grant a peddler's license to Stephen Gravel, doing business as Vivint Solar.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. We will sign this, and you are set.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good luck.
Okay, we're going to jump to number 2, which is review and approve the purchase and sale agreement for Lane property, as we have a member of the Open Space Committee and here with us, Mr. Kibbe.
Good evening, Brandon Kibbe, 146 Rolling Acres Road. As you're aware, the purchase and sale agreement is finalized and fully negotiated, and we're ready to execute it. Hopefully you had enough lead time in order to review it. I apologize for the delays. We've had a heck of a time kind of getting everything reviewed and through seller's counsel, but finally have gotten all the approvals and have a final draft for you to execute. So it outlines the terms that we've discussed in the past, and I think it does everything we need it to do in terms of protecting the town's interests and give us an adequate opportunity to purchase the property.
For those who are coming, excuse me, Madam Town Manager.
No, I can go after you.
Oh, I just for people who may be tuning in and hearing this for the first time, a brief overview of what the
Sure.
Open Space Committee is proposing.
Sure.
What has been discussed with this board, and just again the bird's eye view of the transaction and how it would work.
Terrific. Glad to do it. All from memory. The Selectmen back in October met with the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, Open Space Committee to discuss a piece of property on Holman Street that totals 308 acres in size that adjoins Large Town Forest in the very north central part of town on the Townsend border. This property has frontage on Chase Road, Northfield Road, Gilchrist Street, and Holman Street, and would provide not only significant habitat conservation opportunity, but real meaningful public access to not just the 170 some odd acres we're looking at possibly acquiring there, but the additional 280 acres of existing town forest. So an opportunity really to create a 450 acre conservation block that has a series, a network of trails already on it, has 1.25 miles of Mulpus Brook flowing through it, which not only has high habitat value in and of itself, but also has high water resource value as the main tributary and inflow to Hickory Hills Lake and other resources downstream of Hickory Hills Lake. So it's important for natural resources protection, for outdoor recreation, for access to existing town resources. The property was put on the market last summer and is currently enrolled in Chapter 61B, and as we all know, the town has had opportunities that have come up for conservation through the Chapter 61 right of first refusal process. It's a truncated process. You have 120 days to act. You have to take what you're given, which is whatever you offer you need to match from the developer. And so you're left with a very difficult time, both in timeline and in purchase terms that you have to perform under. Because the Lane property on Holman Street is so significant and has such significant conservation values, we felt it was important to take a proactive approach and see if we could negotiate with the seller exactly the portion of the property that we thought was most beneficial. So out of 308 acres total, we've settled on an acquisition of roughly 170 acres, all located on the easterly side of Holman Street, which includes substantial frontage, about 600 feet of frontage at the minimum if we are only able to acquire Lot E. That will allow us to have a real gateway to this property, an actual conservation property, not just a block of woods that nobody can get to and nobody can use. So really this is building on an existing open space and recreation plan that has identified access and use of existing town resources and enhancement of those existing town resources, and the desire that community residents have discussed about protecting community character. So the deal we've worked out for these 170 acres allows us to have an opportunity to acquire at $3,600 per acre or appraised value, whichever is lesser. So what we've done is we've established a ceiling, which I think is a very fair and equitable price, but we've also protected ourselves because we want to make sure that the property actually has a fair market value that will support that. We'll have an appraiser come out and look at the property, which is actually, we're going to do a site visit tomorrow with the appraiser. So the appraiser's on board and we're starting that process now. And so if the appraiser says that the property's worth $3,200 per acre, that's what we can pay. So we're protected in that as well. The other aspect of the deal, and not an insubstantial aspect of the deal, and the town meeting vote that we're looking forward to on May 3rd, is that we intend to apply for a state grant. It's called the Land Grant Program through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. That grant program provides up to, I've been quoting up till now, 62% reimbursement. I've been starting the process of getting the application together. It's actually 64%. So it's even better than we've reported to date. It provides a 64% reimbursement of the expenditures, both for acquisition costs, but also costs that we may occur along the way. We need to do a title exam. We may need to do a survey, appraisal work, all of that good stuff gets rolled into the project costs that we then get reimbursed for. So that's 64% or $400,000, whichever is lesser. Whatever you reach first, you either hit 64% or you hit the 400,000. So we've designed both the structure of the deal that's before you with the purchase and sale agreement, but also the town meeting vote is contingent upon our successful application for that grant program. And the purchase and sale contract that you're being asked to sign tonight also is reflective of that as well. So we've built in, what we've done is we designed a project that protects the most important resources. We've designed a project that has a very good cost ratio to it. We've designed a project that is flexible and gives us certain benchmarks to meet, town meeting being an important one. And then after town meeting, the grant being another very important benchmark to meet. And so instead of having a 120-day period to react to a property that's 308 acres in size, was on the market for $2.55 million, the total town investment here is projected to be around $250,000, which is very short money, and we're getting exactly the piece of property that is most important for conservation purposes. So that's it in a nutshell. And if you have any specific questions about that.
I just wanted you to explain it to people
I
at home.
appreciate
And
that.
I think the key points are that we've established that, first of all, we've established that it is a very desirable piece of property from all of the standards that the Open Space Committee has designated as important criteria to
Right.
judge property.
So
So that's number one. Number two is you've established a price ceiling that could go lower. We've also established built-in that we're not paying that full price, that the whole deal, and the seller agrees, is contingent on us applying for and receiving the land grant
That's right.
as well. And we're not doing this, and this is probably the most important thing, because we all wrestled with this when it was brought to us, is that this was brought to us proactively before we reached the point where we're told, hey, you have 120 days to decide this, that your committee brought this to our attention, and the Conservation Commission brought it to our attention, and we all agreed that we should form a subcommittee, which you are part of, and Mrs. Bertram is part of, to basically try to secure this deal.
We've been thinking about this for over a year now. This project for over a year, and we've been now proactively pursuing it since October, and we have the earliest we would close with all the timelines that are outlined in your purchase and sale contract would be December 31st of 2014, or February 15th, I think it is, 2015, and so we have this, imagine trying to do everything that we've done so far in a 120-day window. We've all been there and tried to do that. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And to do that with a project that has this important for conservation, and I can't underscore that enough. The Open Space Committee had presented with you our criteria for considering lands for open space acquisition, and we listed 6 different criteria, and we said if any project meets 3 of these criteria, then we should consider it. The Lane property meets 5 of those criteria. If if you were to apply those criteria to the entire inventory of unprotected, undeveloped lands in the town, you would find that very few of them would fit 3 of those criteria, and this one hits 5. And so, I mean, I can't say, I mean, it would be hard to find another piece of property in town that is as important. I can think of a couple, but they're literally on one hand. And so
Let's just focus on this one.
this is extremely important. And I hope the voters will see the value in this and the thought that's gone into this process.
Well, we certainly will be talking about it here tonight. I'm sure other committees will be talking about it, and certainly you'll have your presentation at town meetings. So.
Well, and I would also like to say is we have a couple of site visits that are scheduled already, which we'd like to be able to show the public the property, not just talk about it. We'd like to actually show them the property. So anybody who'd like to join us, we have 2 Saturday morning site visits planned, one for April 19th, 10 a.m., meeting at Holman Street by the bridge that's blocked off over Mulpus Brook, and another 10 a.m. the following Saturday, the 26th, at 10 a.m. at Holman Street, same spot. And we'll lead those site visits. And my hope is to very soon schedule a public forum where I can give a presentation very similar to the presentation I gave last week to the Finance Committee, where we show maps and slides and all this other stuff and kind of put some more information out there in advance of those site visits.
One of the things I might recommend on those walks that you're going to go on, because some people may want to go and it won't fit in, either one won't fit in their schedule, is I would take some video that while you're doing your presentation that doesn't have audio, so people can see what some of these important sites of the walk are. You can show the brook and everything while you're giving your presentation or while you're talking, so people can really, if they can't get a chance to get there in person, at least they'll see what you believe and other people believe are the most important components of it.
Sure, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Mrs. Bertram.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Can I?
Yes.
I just want to point out one thing. There is one change to the purchase and sale agreement that came from town council today that both parties agreed to, and it is on page 7, section 20. In the draft that you have, paragraph A is crossed out. That has been put back in the final draft, and I'm just going to read what's in there because there's one clause that is in there. So in the final draft, it says buyer and seller agree that upon consummation of the closing, buyer will be acquiring the premise in as-is condition, and this is the new part, except as expressly provided in this agreement, with all faults, if any, and without any warranty express or implied, except as set forth herein. That's the only change in the document, and both parties agreed to that.
And the purpose for that change, just for a little background, is the seller really wanted the as-is clause in there. We really didn't want the as-is clause in there. And at the end of the day, the biggest reason we didn't want the as-is clause in there is we want to make sure that they perform to be able to provide clear and marketable title and to provide the property in a clean, uncontaminated, no hazardous waste sort of state. That's protected elsewhere in the document. And so that's why there's that as provided elsewhere in the document clause. Obviously, we're not going to buy it unless we have clear marketable title. We're not going to buy it if it's found to be environmentally contaminated. So, we have outs built in there as well. So once we decide to actually acquire it, sure, we're buying it as is. But nothing in that clause would preclude the seller from its obligations under Mass General Laws 21E, which is the environmental contamination statute. So if down the road, 20 years down the road, we discover there's a bunch of oil drums that were buried somewhere on the property and it's known to be done by the prior owner, then we can seek recourse legally with the prior owner. There's nothing in that clause that would survive or trump statutory protections.
Any questions from anybody?
Don't have any questions, just a comment for people at home if they don't get to go on the walks. The presentation you did at the Finance Committee last week was wonderful. It's one of the best presentations I think I've seen maybe ever.
Good.
Honestly,
Glad to hear that. Thank
it was
you.
a wonderful job, very deep, very thorough, a lot of good information. So I would recommend people go on YouTube to the PAC channel. They can get a recap there. I wanted to thank you for your efforts in this. I want to thank Mrs. Bertram, Mr. Becasa, Mr. Cote. They did a lot of wonderful work putting this together, putting the whole plan together, working this. And I want to thank the Lane family for working with us. It's a big deal for them to do so and to be willing to do so. And I want to thank the Open Space Committee. I mean, we formed that a few years ago, and, it took a while to get it going, but there was so much work the committee put in as a whole to get to a place where we could identify this so cleanly and so clearly. And to have, again, to avoid the 120-day mess you get with first right of refusal, to actually have an actionable plan, I mean, it's wonderful. So just thanks everyone involved in getting it to this place.
Good, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yeah, it does go to show when you had all these different boards, because the Open Space Committee, of course, is comprised of people from other boards and committees. And, if any of this is going to work, we really need that kind of cooperation between everybody, so thank you.
Well, and I can't say enough that, I mean, the formation of the team that you all put together, I think was critical. The fact that we had representatives from multiple land use boards within town working together on this project, then, I think that was absolutely necessary. So, do we want to take a recess?
No, I think we're okay.
I think we're okay.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So, with that, well, maybe, I don't know, are we waiting on the vote?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I don't think she'll be back.
Okay. All right, so, with this before us, does anybody have any further questions for Mr. Kibbe or about the document? I would
Just one quick
Mr.
question. You had one outstanding item is the reason we didn't act on this last week. I assume that was resolved to
That was
your
resolved.
satisfaction?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I think this document is exactly what we need to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So with that being said, I will entertain a motion on executing this purchase and sale agreement.
I would move that we approve the purchase and sale agreement.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Terrific.
None. Thank you, and we look forward to your continued work and pushing this in a very positive direction for town meetings. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to do you need to take a recess?
No. Go home, everybody.
Okay, so we're going to look at the annual town meeting warrant. Oh, hold on, we are signing the purchase and sale agreements. Well, it says that we're going to order them, but generally this is something done between the town manager and the chair to order them.
Do you want to just go through
We
and I
should
can
go-
describe?
Yeah, let's describe them, and then whatever numbers we have, if you have actual numbers in any of these,
I do.
okay, then we can start taking recommendations. Is that okay with the board?
Sure.
Okay.
So the first 6 articles are the revolving funds that are required to be authorized on an annual basis. We take those up on the consent agenda typically. The first is the ambulance billing revolving fund, and the amount that is identified for expenditure is up to $50,000. This is the same as in prior years. I should say all of these 6 are either the same as what they were last year or very close to last year's expenditures. Do you want me to go through?
Well, I think in light that they're usually done in consent calendar, we'll try to mimic that here. If you want to go over the first 6
Okay.
and just say what they are, and then we'll vote them here
Okay.
together, if that's okay with the board. I mean, there's nothing new in any of these.
Okay, so the second is the timber rights revolving fund with an amount of $10,000. The third is the school custodial special detail revolving fund with an amount of $25,000. Article 4 is the Green Thumb revolving fund with an amount of $20,000. Article 5 is the library revolving fund with an amount of $12,000. And Article 6 is the MART, Montechusett Area Regional Transportation Revolving Fund with an amount of $45,000.
And just for people who may not know revolving funds, can you give a quick, explanation of what a revolving fund is?
Revolving funds are set up to collect user fees for services provided, and the cost of those services are paid for out of the revolving funds.
Okay. Any questions about the first 6 articles, which are the revolving funds? If not, I will entertain a recommendation.
I move that we recommend approval on all of these articles.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Article 7 is to hear reports. At this time, we don't have anything scheduled for that. Article 8 is is an article to pay any prior year expenses. We do not have any prior year bills that we expect to put forward at town meeting. Article 9 is the fiscal 2014 budget adjustment article. We will have a presentation for this. I'm still working with the town accountant on this, and we will have this ready for you next week. But as we've discussed in the past, we have a deficit in snow and ice that is in excess of $200,000. We have a deficit in our projected deficit in our veterans' benefits of close to $40,000. We have running a deficit in our police injured on duty of about $15,000. We do have some surpluses, about $90,000 in health insurance that we expect to be able to put toward that, and some other small surpluses in insurances, and as well as the full amount of the reserve fund, which we expect to put toward the snow and ice deficit. I don't expect that we will have enough in underexpended lines in fiscal 14 to cover the overages, so I will propose that we do a supplemental appropriation from free cash to cover the amount. So between the supplemental appropriation of free cash to cover 14 and the amount that's proposed to be appropriated in 15 to go into the stabilization fund, I expect that we will fully expend our free cash for fiscal 14, but we won't be carrying any deficit forward into fiscal 15. And again, I'll have that finalized for you for next week's meeting.
And we will be discussing the budget later on this evening when we get there. So obviously we're not taking a vote on that just yet.
Yeah. So Articles 10, 11, 12, and 13 are collective bargaining agreements. We don't have any settlements on any of these agreements yet. We may or may not by the time we come to town meeting, so those we will need to hold on. Article 14 is the fiscal 2015 capital plan. We do this separate from the operating budget, even though it's, for the most part, we pay cash, so it does impact our operating budget, but it is separate. And if do you want to go through this now, or do you want to talk about this when we talk about the budget? Probably easiest to take it up with the budget.
Yeah.
Sure, we'll take it up with the budget.
Okay, so we'll hold on that. Article 15 is the Solid Waste Disposal Enterprise Fund. The amount of the budget requested is $285,000. This is the same as last fiscal year. This is to pay for the costs associated with the pay-as-you-throw program. We are not proposing any bag fee increases for the program for fiscal 15. So this will
So
be.
this one has an actual dollar amount, and so we can take a recommendation on this.
I would move that we recommend approval.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Article 16 is the Lunenburg Water Department Water Enterprise Fund budget for fiscal 2015, requesting an appropriation of $25,000. This is separate from the Lunenburg Water District. This covers the portion in town that's within the corporate limits of the town of Lunenburg, but outside of the corporate limits of the Lunenburg Water District. So this is the tri-town area of town. $25,000 is higher than what we had last year. There was some discussion at the Finance Committee meeting on Thursday night about this amount because I did increase it over last year. Our expenses related to the enterprise fund are minimal and sometimes nothing because it's typically a pass-through. But this amount is just in the event that we have to do any work on the system. It's easier to have something in the budget rather than have to go through a process to get approval to expend during the fiscal year if we find ourselves in an emergency situation. We do have an unwritten agreement with the Lunenburg Water District that they do provide assistance to us. They provide technical support and would also be available for a fee to do any work that is needed. We don't anticipate anything, but we do need to have something available in the budget in the event of work needing to be done.
So how much was the increase from last year?
Last year, I believe it was $15,000. And again, we haven't spent anything. We haven't spent anything of any significance since I've been with the town, so more than 6 years. We're not increasing fees or anything to cover this. This is coming from the retained earnings of the enterprise fund.
Recommend approval?
Second?
Second?
All those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Article 17 is the fiscal 2015 budget for the sewer enterprise fund. The amount requested is $814,242. The sewer commission made a presentation to the finance committee at their meeting last week, reviewed the budget. The budget is balanced. There's no request to use retained earnings, and there's also no request to increase user fees.
Now, this was just forwarded to us from the town manager today or yesterday. So I would probably hold off. I personally would like to look at it, not that I think I'll find anything, but I just want to see it. So we do have until next week. We have next week's meeting. Then anything we don't recommend tonight, any recommendations we make next week can still be in the printed warrant. So I would ask that we don't vote on this tonight and give us a chance to look over it. So Article 18.
Okay. So Article 18 is the fiscal 2015 budget. Do you want to skip over that and come back to it?
Yes.
Small thing.
Article 19 is a request to make an appropriation into the stabilization fund in the amount of $74,729. That is the amount that is shown in the town manager's budget.
Can you say that amount again, please?
$74,729.
Okay.
That is the amount that is needed to deposit into the stabilization fund to maintain the balance at 5% of operating expenses. The proposal is to make that appropriation from free cash. And it is the same amount that is included in the budget.
And again, I just want to keep repeating this. I'm sure you're getting tired of hearing it from me, but the importance of having a stabilization fund at about 5% of the operating budget is the impact on our bond rating. Again, we've seen our bond rating improve 4 levels in the last couple of years based on, even with the challenges we faced financially, fiscally, as a town, as a commonwealth, our revenue flows. The fiscal management of the town is strong, as evidenced by this, and again, as we're looking ahead to borrow the largest amount we ever have for the school project, it's extremely important that we keep our bond rating strong, because it will save us hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest costs. So this is extremely important. Sometimes people look at stabilization and they see it as a rainy day fund, and they wonder why we don't spend it, or why tax money goes into a stabilization fund. It's because it saves us that money plus over the long term in costs. So it's extremely important. With
I
that
would
said,
agree.
I'd recommend approval.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Article 20 is a request from the Sewer Commission to amend the sewer service area map, to change the map coloration to indicate only those areas inside and outside the sewer service area, and to remove a couple of different parcels. Parcel 75-54, which is 243 White Street in Lunenburg. Parcel 75-55, which is 683 Pearl Street in Fitchburg. That's a funky spelling of Fitchburg. And parcel 75-58, which is 700 Pearl Street in Fitchburg, from the Lunenburg sewer service area. So this is something that we do typically once a year, where we find mistakes in the sewer service map, and like the zoning map, it needs to be amended to reflect accurate information.
And I believe that the parcels on Pearl Street and White Street are actually served from Fitchburg end, and therefore are not receiving sewer service from the town.
Okay.
I move we recommend approval.
And so the other thing, is the bullet number 1 is just changing the map coloration?
Right. What happens is that the map has one color if you're in the sewer service area, and another color if it's outside, and then if you're in the service area and you're receiving service, it's another color. So they've discovered various areas that were not colored correctly.
Okay, gotcha.
It's not expanding the sewer service area or decreasing it.
Okay. So we have a motion to recommend approval. Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Article 21 is an article put forth by the Sewer Commission seeking authorization to borrow a sum not to exceed $2.2 million for the purpose of financing the design, permitting, construction of a sewer collection system as described in the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, to include the areas of Sunset Avenue, Harris Avenue, Lakeview Avenue, Pine Grove Road, with connection to the sewer main on Prospect Street, and the areas of Pratt Street, West Street, and Rennie Street, with connection to the sewer main on Whalum Road. These are two projects that will be done through betterments. I'm not sure if it was at which meeting, at this meeting or the Finance Committee meeting, actually the Finance Committee meeting, a couple members of the Sewer Commission actually went out door to door a couple of weekends ago to talk to people in these areas about the benefit of connecting their homes to municipal sewer service. Obviously, in this area of town, this is an older area of town, smaller lot, so we typically have issues with people and septics. It's difficult to replace septic systems over in this area to meet the current requirements. So this is two great projects to be included. So these will be funded through betterments. The funds will be borrowed through the state, through the trust, as we've done in the past. So we receive a good deal on the borrowing. But because it's a borrowing article, it requires the approval of town meeting.
Have they had a public hearing on this yet? And will they? Do you
I
know?
think I would defer to the liaison.
They're not required to have a public hearing. They are required to receive over two-thirds of the property owners in the area for their approval. They already had it for the Sunset Ave, the first area, and as Mrs. Bidell talked about, the Pratt Street, West Street, Rennie Street, that's where the additional outreach was, and they reached the over two-thirds at that point. They have had regular mail communication to all residents in that area throughout this process, so, and multiple communications.
Just as one member, I would ask if we could have a member of the sewer commission here to, I mean, it's a large borrowing, and I realize it's going through betterments, but something this large, I'd like to know that we met with them or heard a presentation from them. I certainly feel that way before I would vote to recommend approval or not. I just want to hear more about the project and the steps that were taken, just so I feel more comfortable with it.
I can follow up with the sewer commission and get that scheduled.
I don't know what the pleasure of the board is on that.
I would agree, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. If they can, if we can, I don't know, I realize it's late notice, if we can do it for next week, so we can make a vote on it and recommendation, so it's printed. As I've always said in the past, I mean, there's many things that we can recommend approval for in printed form, certainly helps out the people at town meeting.
Or disapprove.
Or disapprove, correct. We should have our printed recommendation there.
There you
Yes.
go.
Thank you.
Article 22 is the purchase of the Lane property.
Okay.
So one thing that we didn't touch upon in the presentation you just heard by Mr. Kibbe is the financing, and we did talk about that at the Finance Committee meeting last week. So because the property, the closing of the property would be scheduled for sometime between December 2014 and February 2015, there would be very minimal costs associated with the purchase in fiscal 15. So my recommendation would be that we do short-term financing on the project through fiscal 15. We do expect to receive the grant by the end of fiscal 15, and then in fiscal 16 we would do the permanent financing of whatever the town's share is, and at this point it's estimated at about $250,000. So the interest cost associated with the project in fiscal 15 is 3 to 6 months worth of interest on $650,000. So it's about $2,000 to $2,500. That is not currently in the budget, but as you know, there's money sitting on the table to be distributed. So that would need to come from that. And then going forward, the permanent financing of the project, that is a decision that this board makes, what the term is. So the term really can be anything that you choose. Originally, I was asked about a 5 or a 10-year term. At the meeting last week, the presentation included everything up to a 20-year term. You certainly can do whatever you're interested in. But if you're talking about a 5-year acquisition cost, that's about $50,000. If you're talking about a 10-year, it's about $27,000. Whatever the term is, that needs to be included as an item in the capital plan going forward. That we're going to have to set that aside in the capital plan because we don't have funding within the levy limit to take it from anywhere else.
I'm trying to think, do we have one other stabilization fund for purchases, and I don't know if this one applies.
Well, the other stabilization, when we talk about the balance in the state, we have 2 stabilization funds. We have the general stabilization fund, and then we have the one we call the zoning incentive stabilization fund, and it's just called that because the money that we put into that was through the 40R project, Tri-Town Landing, the payments that we receive from the town. But when we talk about the balance in the stabilization fund, that $1.5+ million, it's both of those funds combined. So if we take
Okay.
anything out of either one,
Fair
we're going to
enough.
be below the 5%.
Okay.
I would make a motion that we recommend approval of this article.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion?
The only question I have is that then becomes an item that we've predetermined comes out of some of the budget surplus. So do we want to make that decision right now, or do we want to wait until we have the budget discussion? I mean, I don't have a problem either way. I just wanted to note that of the 119 or whatever it's going to be, that would be where it comes from.
My personal feeling is that the property that we're looking at, and I don't mean to exaggerate, I'm not one prone to exaggerate, is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So with that being said, to me, that is a high priority. If this property gets sold and developed, it's not like you can wait and get it again. So I would be willing to, yes, vote on it now outside of the budget.
I totally agree, no problem.
I do think we're going to have to come to the terms on how we want to finance it before town meeting.
I would agree with that.
Yep.
It doesn't, those terms are not in the article, nor they need to be, right? We can explain what we will do, or will they need to be part of the article?
They are not part of the article, and they don't need to be part of the
I
article.
didn't think so, so we'll just
Just
have to
just-
explain. But to your point, Mr. Matthews, I think you're absolutely right. I think we want to be clear from the outset how we intend on financing it, yes. So we have a motion, did anybody second it?
Second?
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? None.
Okay, Article 23 is the amendments to the PAC bylaw, which I assume you want to discuss, so we
Yes.
could come back to that. Article 24 is an article submitted by the Cemetery Commission, a request to appropriate the sum of $25,000 from the sale of cemetery lots accounts to be used for care, improvements, and embellishments of the cemeteries. The Finance Committee asked for some more specificity on what was being planned. I don't have that yet, so I can bring that back to you next week if you would prefer to have that before you make a recommendation.
Yes, please.
Okay, Article 25 is the Planning Board's article to amend the zoning bylaw to include a new section in use regulations by adding a section 4.16 entitled Registered Marijuana Dispensaries. Do you want to, as with the Sewer Commission, do you want me to request somebody from the Planning Board come to present that? There are some, I did receive an updated copy of the bylaw from the planning office, either yesterday or today, I can't remember which. So I believe there are some minor changes to that based upon the public hearing that the planning board held a week or so ago.
Well, and the planning board has not closed that public hearing. They're
Okay.
having a continuation of that on April 14th, I believe. Correct, April 14th? Yeah, so,
Seems like it's going to be in flux right up to town meeting, so I think we're probably going to be in a place we're going to want to wait till town meeting to caucus and recommend from there.
but I do think, I think that the close of their public hearing is going to be after we can put it in our published warrant of our recommendations, but I think that we should invite the planning board to present it, because again, it gives a good opportunity for people beforehand to hear about it and have people discuss it.
Okay, so for April 22nd.
But, I mean, yeah, I mean, that they're, obviously, we're closing in on the end after their public hearing, so anything, yeah, the 22nd would probably be the best,
Okay.
unless we have a 29th meeting.
Which I think you should plan on having
I
a
think you
29th
probably,
meeting.
I think you're probably right.
I would move that we make our recommendation at town meeting.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, Article 26 is a request to establish a student transportation offset receipt under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E. with an amount of $31,000. This is new this year. This is, fiscal 14 is the second year that the school department has charged transportation fees, and the best way to handle transportation fees, bus fees, in order to segregate them from the general fund is to set up an offset receipt account. The Finance Committee asked a number of questions that I have forwarded to the town accountant, and we'll have the answers available at their meeting on Thursday night. I did also ask the town accountant to be prepared to come to your meeting next week. It's been 10-plus years since I've worked with offset receipt accounts, and I just don't have the answers to those questions. But this is, right now the money is coming into the general fund, and the best practice is to have it go into an offset receipt account.
Guess we'll wait to hear those answers. So anybody who's here on Thursday night, or we'll hear them on next Tuesday.
Article 27 is a request to establish a stabilization fund within the Monty Tech budget. I'm still waiting on the actual funding, the actual wording of this, and I will need to schedule Barbara Reynolds, who is the chair of the school committee and Lunenburg's representative to the school committee, to come in to speak about this. They sent a letter, which I'm sure you saw and we've talked about in the past, because this has been kicking around for almost since annual town meeting last year. But they would like to establish a stabilization fund within their budget to handle any unexpected expenditures that come up. And I think there are reasons to do it and maybe reasons not to do it. This regional schools have the ability to maintain an excess and deficiency fund, which to me has always been analogous to a stabilization fund, but they have reasons why a stabilization fund makes more sense than an excess and deficiency. So that's something that they can come in and talk to you about.
And the other question I have on that is that, does every town have to approve it, or is it a certain majority, and therefore
Right,
everybody?
they need a majority.
Simple majority of their membership towns.
Okay.
And I believe at this point they have the majority, but they were still pretty insistent that they wanted to get it on the annual town meeting warrant of all of their member communities.
Well, my initial reaction, especially after hearing their presentation to the Finance Committee, is they've done pretty well with their, excess and deficiencies, and they've been able to fund a lot of things. And I think it would, while it fits in the would be nice to category, to set aside money just to be there, we're trying to scrimp and stretch things here and there. I don't know why. That would not be one of my highest priorities.
Yeah.
Certainly, I hold no ill will to people trying to advocate for their cause, and I applaud them for that. But I don't see how I would support it personally. It doesn't matter how it was worded.
I think part of it will go to what she has to say for the reasoning. I don't know if their their bond rating is affected by this as well. So I'd be interested in seeing what she has to say, and actually seeing the wording of it as well.
Okay, Article 28 was submitted by the Agricultural Commission. This is their right to farm bylaw, and I assume you would like to have somebody come in to talk about this.
Indeed.
This came in the last day that the warrant was open. I knew that they were working on it, but didn't have the...
I've done a quick review. This follows the state model bylaw for the right to farm, except they have taken out some requirements for real estate agents to proactively notify potential buyers of a right to farm. So a lot of that will follow the model. I would welcome the Agricultural Committee to do that. The other thing I would like them to address, which is in the model bylaw and in this one, is the definition of farm, which is section 2, include any parcel or contiguous parcel used for the primary purpose of agricultural or any accessory use. I just like the definition of how big, how small. I think that would be a question that most people would ask at town meeting. But I think that they've done a lot of work addressing this. I know they did some outreach during this process.
Excellent. So if we can get them in front of us, that'd be great.
Article 29 is a request to accept a new roadway, Whitetail Crossing. I will have to schedule a hearing in front of you for that. So that will happen either, well, probably not until the very end of this month.
Okay. And that, any public way has to have a public hearing, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Article 30 is an article that I put forth, and this is a request to approve a reorganization of the land use departments as provided for in Article 5, Section 1B of the town's charter. So, as you know, I've talked about changing the position of planning director to a land use director position, and I will be putting forth a written proposal for your consideration at one of the next meetings. I'm not entirely sure that this is a reorganization, an administrative reorganization that requires town meeting approval, but because you haven't seen the written proposal, I wanted to put this on just in the event that you felt, or town council felt, that it was something that fell under that provision that would require town meeting approval. Article 31 was submitted by petition, and this is a request to accept a local acceptance statute, Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 12, relative to the sale of liqueurs and cordials by common victualers. So this is the request by the owner of Kebabalicious. This would just be another option for the beer and wine license. It doesn't give you any additional licenses, but gives you the option to issue either beer and wine or beer, wine, liqueurs, and cordials if this is passed.
Can we have that section printed so that we can review what that section is?
Yes.
Have you reviewed it at all?
I have it. I don't remember.
No, I mean,
much of
if
it.
you haven't, that's fine. If you haven't reviewed it, because it came in by petition. I'm just wondering what are the effects of us accepting it or not accepting it are.
Yeah, I guess the clarifying question I had is if it's approved at town meeting, if the petition is approved at town meeting, does that mean that existing beer and wine license holders could come back and ask for that
Yes.
addendum?
Yeah, they would have to come back. It wouldn't automatically
Okay,
apply
right.
to them.
And it's not addendum, it would be a new license.
Yeah.
Okay.
They would have to be asked for a
But it's
change in
not,
license.
but it's not limited by number, it's limited by the existing number, I
Right,
guess.
right.
Yeah,
It does
okay.
not add any or subtract any, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we'll postpone that one.
Okay. So would you like to go back to PAC or budget?
Well, we have to go over both of them, so. Anybody have any preference?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, my preference would be to start with PAC because due to a personal relationship I have with someone who works for the public access, I would like to recuse myself from the discussion on the PAC bylaw revision.
Okay, since you've gone through that energy already, then we will go to PAC first. And,
So that's the last 2 pages of your packet. And what I did was I took the, I believe I took the existing bylaw.
Did you get my latest
I
email?
I did.
Okay.
I didn't have a chance to look at
Okay.
it, though. So I took what I believed was the existing bylaw, went through the minutes of your February 11th meeting. I was not at that meeting, so I reviewed the minutes. You identified a number of changes that you wanted to make to the bylaw. I put those into this model, and there were a couple of other additions that were submitted after that are included here. And there may be one error still on when the meeting occurs, which I didn't have a chance to look at, so.
okay, so we'll just go through and look at the changes. The first thing I want to note is just a technical change. I don't think we should remove Article 3, because then it's going to go from Article 2 to 4, and somebody's going to think in future time that it's a mistake. We should just leave where it says Article 3 office and then say removed or deleted at whatever.
The other thing we could do is just change the numbering going forward.
The reason I hesitate doing that is I don't know if it's referenced anywhere else, because then if it's referenced anywhere else, then we have to go and check for that. It's just easier to just say that that section was deleted intentionally by this vote or whatever. I mean, that's just easy so we don't have to review anything else.
Yeah, I don't believe that it's referenced elsewhere in the bylaws. And I think what they did when they did this original bylaw, they took it from another town,
Yeah, I think they did too.
everything, so.
But I don't know if we referenced it anywhere. Anyway, it's just easier to say it's kind of like this page intentionally left blank, kind of. Anyway, I mean, I just wanted to point that out. I just don't want it to go from 2 to 4. If we remove it, we could certainly renumber everything.
I should take this opportunity to let you know that in your drawer, your desk drawer, there is a copy of the bylaws, the town charter, and your
I didn't see the charter.
and policies and procedures, and they're stamped office copy, do not remove, and somebody's already removed my copy of the selectmen bylaws. So-
Nice.
So if you wanted to look at the existing PAC bylaw, it's 25 in the bylaw notebook. Okay.
This isn't the charter.
This is the charter.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow, this is the best. Okay. Wow.
That's all the other two is.
Okay, so Section 3. So now we have Article 4, membership. Section 1, where we've changed, and I'm just reviewing what the changes are here. We're reducing the number of the membership from 7 to 5.
Mr. Chairman, actually, if you go back to mission statement,
Yep.
we've added, this is one of the things that I recommended, the last sentence, PAC shall be responsible for the formulation
Okay.
of
All right.
policy, directives, and guidelines, provided, however, that nothing in this section shall be construed to authorize any member of the PAC, nor a majority of such member to become involved in the day-to-day administration of the PAC. You'll see some other information that relates to the town manager later on that we had included. This mirrors what the Board of Selectmen has, and this mirrors what the Sewer Commission has, to make it clear that, sort of to make it a higher-level board.
Yeah, again, on a technical note, I would just change the last reference to the word PAC, because PAC stands for the Public Access Cable Committee, so certainly the committee should be involved in what happens with the committee. So we should really say with the day-to-day administration of the Lunenburg television, Lunenburg Public Access Television. I would just change that.
Yep.
And I apologize, the packet that I sent out electronically, that was highlighted in yellow, so
Yep.
we're going to have to stay on.
Yeah,
this 'cause
I printed
the
out in
yellow's
color
gone.
locally, so.
That's why I missed it, so I apologize.
Yep. And as a result of that, if we go back to the Section 1 number of members, and I'm fine with leaving it at the moment where it says, or full-time students at Lunenburg High School, I believe that the membership of having the high school students involved in the PAC originally was the idea that they'd get to be involved in doing television, not being on a committee.
Okay.
But I think since the committee has evolved to a policy-making, we don't have to delete that, but I think the goal is, I think full-time students would be more interested in working with the staff at the public access instead of being on the committee. So I'm not recommending changing it now, just sort of being aware of that.
And I'm cognizant of that. I appreciate you bringing that up. I agree with you. Term of appointment has not changed. Composition of membership has not changed. Voting power has not changed. Resignation has not changed. Attendance,
It's not changed.
yeah, that's fine. So then vacancies, and vacancies should be changed as noted here. So vacancies shall be filled by the Board of Selectmen. That's it, period. It's not in joint cooperation with or anything. They will be, if the remaining members of PAC want to informally interview candidates for vacancies and want to make recommendations to us, that's fine, but the board is the appointing authority. Representations has not changed. Non-PAC members has not changed.
So Article 5, Section 1, that language is incorrect.
Right, that is correct. It is correct that it is incorrect.
Right, so it should say regular meetings will be held as determined by the PAC with the time and place to be posted at Town Hall.
Okay, so if we can get a finalized version of that.
And my only comment on that is I'd be interested to see what other committees have. Is regular mean quarterly? And I don't want to unduly restrict them, but if we have anything with any other committees, I'd just be interested to see what they've said.
And I think we should. I just, off the top of my head, I don't believe any appointed committee has any set, they've always been able to determine their own meetings.
Right.
Special meetings has not changed. Organizational meetings has not changed. Opening meeting law, we're striking the word "the" to make, because that's just a correction. Now, of course, the whole issue of a quorum. Now, we can go with this language, or we can specifically say a number, so we never, ever have to worry about that again.
That
I
would be
think-
different than,
Would it? Okay.
Yeah, part of the thing is that when we say total membership, there's no total membership earlier. It would say you should refer back to Article
Okay.
4, Section 1 is the way you could do
Okay,
it.
so here's a suggestion, that the presence of a simple majority of the membership as defined in, and then reference that
Yep.
in that section.
Article 4, Section 1.
or number of members. And not,
Oh, well, we could do that. I mean, which, again, I'm for either. It doesn't matter to me. I just want it to be very, very, very clear to anybody
Yep.
reading this. So do we want to go with a hard number and say you have to have three? Three represents a quorum.
oh, no, I meant instead of, to take out total membership, you could, since that is not a defined term, you could insert number of members, which is a defined term, which has a definition. So the
Yep.
presence of a simple majority of the number of members. Or you could reference that number of
Well,
members
right.
section.
Well, that's the confusion.
Well, just put in parentheses, as defined in Article 4, Section 1.
Yep.
That way, it's really, really, really clear.
Right.
Okay.
Members in attendance, does that extend to people if they call in? If,
You-
on the outside chancellor, if somebody,
Well, well, yeah, that's,
Actually, no, because I believe
You can't reach a quorum through
Right.
By phone.
remote
Right.
participation.
but.
that's defined in our other.
Right, but that doesn't mean if there's a quorum in the room and then there's someone calling in, can they vote?
Yes.
yes,
Because we've defined that in.
That's not, are they technically in attendance or are they?
no, well, you would have a quorum. Do we need to say it, the presence of us at the meeting?
Oh, so we should strike that last sentence, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Right, because
Right,
we have
right.
a law, we have a bylaw that defines.
Oh, votes.
Right, right, that's, I understand.
Yes,
now.
so votes shall be cast only by members in attendance should be stricken,
Because the other part automatically
because now we have a
applies.
bylaw that allows for remote attendance. Officers, Section 1 has not changed, Section 2 has not changed. Section 3, we've stricken the last clause, except as it pertains to the term limits policy, because there is none. So the term of office for the officers shall be 1 year with no restrictions on reelection. Well, actually, not reelection, should be reappointment.
No, it's actually reelection.
Oh, terms of office, okay, I'm sorry. Officers. Vacancy of officers, I don't quite understand this. But I guess it's fine. Yeah, okay, so we've just stricken that with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, because nobody else, no other appointed body has to go through the Board of Selectmen to select officers or replacement officers. Duties of the officers has not changed. Amendments has not changed. Staff has changed, so the first two sentences have been removed.
Actually, going back, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Duties of officers, the last sentence. The agendas will be posted in accordance with the town charter. I mean, we're really working more with Mass General Law.
Right.
Specifically, right?
You know, this is the opportunity to fix that in accordance with the open meeting law.
Yeah, certainly to make it clear, the fact that it's not listed there doesn't mean they're excluded, exempt anyway, but yeah, we should. Yeah, so he or she shall post the meeting agenda in accordance with town charter and open meeting law.
I mean, they don't technically post the meeting, the town clerk does, right? Town clerk's office. Or,
Shall post or have posted. How about that?
Well, actually, we already have that in Article 5, Meetings, Section 4, Open Meeting Law. All meetings shall be posted and conducted in compliance with the provisions of such and such shall be, and then we have it there again, the meeting agenda shall be posted in accordance with the town charter. I would say, right now, this is the duty of the secretary, as opposed to any other officer, to make it clear. And there are some committees that different officers actually send the posting to the town clerk's office. So,
Well, if they want to, I mean, we can move this to whatever, but I mean, if they want to designate the secretary as the one who has to post it,
Right.
that's fine with me. Just somebody who has to post it. In this case, it's not the chair.
again, I think this may have come from another town, and
Yep.
I'm not sure we even have anything in the town charter about posting, other than that has to be in compliance with the open meeting law.
We have a bylaw that says it has to be
On the website,
right,
but that's not the charter.
not in charter.
So in accordance with town, it should say town bylaws. When in doubt, say town charter, bylaws, and the open meeting law.
And any other
And anything that may
document
come down the pipe.
governs posting a meeting.
let's hope they all agree.
We could always ask for a legal opinion.
Oh, please.
Only if
I think
it's
the-
only if it's within our regular operating.
I mean, the driving force is the open meeting law.
I mean, I think the open meeting law, Article 5, Section 4, I think what's nice is to say you have to comply with the town bylaws too, but we don't say that other places as well.
I mean, I think it's, if we just keep focusing on open meeting law, that becomes the driving.
I mean, it's certainly easy enough to say. You just replace with the town charter, you say with the, with the Massachusetts open meeting laws and all other applicable town
Yep.
bylaws.
There you go.
Okay with section 5 then?
So that would also be repeated on Section 4, last sentence.
So, where are you referring to?
Article 5, Meetings, Section 4, last sentence.
Oh.
That's basically saying that to the committee, you have to do this, and then Section 5 of Article 6, Officers, says the secretary is the one that's going to do it.
Oh, okay, so that right here, the town charter. it's the
Just as
same
long as
wording
it's-
we use there.
As long as it's consistent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Amendments? Anything in amendments?
Does the PAC amend their bylaws, or do we?
No, they can't. I mean,
So,
it depends.
I mean, they can recommend them, right?
Right.
What this is they propose it has to be approved by the PAC and then sent to the Board of Selectmen.
Right, so we still have to be approved at the town meeting.
And
They're
it's,
just saying that they can have meetings to propose them, and we have to approve them.
and the last sentence is the important part, I think, to address your concern, if I'm thinking about it. This protocol applies only to the PAC's ability to initiate changes and not intended to usurp the rights given to registered voters
Right.
of the town, which allows the town to change things. So,
Like we're doing now.
right.
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 Well, I mean, it just says it's sent to the Lunenburg Board of Selectmen for insertion. There's no oversight by the board at that point. If that's the intent, I mean.
Then be sent to the Lunenburg Board of Selectmen. We can just add for potential insertion or possible insertion, request for insertion. We don't have to, it doesn't have to be rubber stamped if that's what your question is.
Well, that's what it says.
Right, so we can change that.
Indication that we have any.
Be sent to the Lunenburg Board of Selectmen for their review and approval.
So the PAC is making suggestions or recommendations. They're not making changes to the bylaw.
No, only town meeting can do that.
Well, I know, but
Right.
the way it's written now, it's PAC does it, comes through us, it goes to town meeting.
Right, so, I mean, if you want to, generally, I mean, if you want to reserve the ability to block it because it's an appointed board, I certainly can say that. I mean, we generally don't try to filter out things from other committees or boards, but generally other committees that are appointed don't ask for amendments to their own bylaws, so.
I mean, that's what we're doing now.
Sure. So what do you propose as a, what should it be read
I
as?
would say the PAC may consider recommendations for amendments or alterations, or they can submit, consider and submit recommendations for amendments and alterations to be approved by the Board of Selectmen and passed on to the town meeting for final approval.
Your only objection, if I understand correctly, is that one sentence that it will then be sent to the Lunenburg Board of Selectmen for insertion in the warrant and be submitted to the next town meeting for approval.
Right.
Okay, so we just want to change that one thing. I don't care what their process is before then. So be sent to the Lunenburg Board of Selectmen for approval and possible insertion. How about that? Can
Okay.
we do that?
Sure.
So my one concern that's coming to mind immediately is just, with any appointed board, they didn't technically ask for you, like, we have the Lane property, and I have it listed as being submitted by the Open Space Committee. That's an appointed board. We have the capital planning article submitted by the Capital Planning Committee, which is an appointed board. This board doesn't officially vote to allow those to be on the warrant. I mean, you vote on the warrant as a whole, but it just seems like this would be a little bit different than the process we've followed in the past.
Well, the Board of Selectmen, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, we don't exercise that often, and I would agree with that. But I think it's reserved as a power of the Board of Selectmen to not put things.
Yes.
We can require and say, we're not putting it on and you have to get signatures. We give a lot of deference to committees and boards, but I don't think we're necessitated to put them on.
I would agree. I don't believe you are either. This bylaw in total is much more detailed than
Right.
any of the other committee bylaws.
And this is also
Oh.
different. This is also different in the fact that this suggests, or not suggests, it's completely written to their ability to change their own bylaw. You know, the Open Space Committee is coming to the town meeting saying, hey, we have a piece of property, do you want it or not? They're not changing their own bylaw and their own rules. So I think that's why we have to be very clear that you can make recommendations, doesn't mean we're going to have to put them on.
I would make a suggestion that we have the language saying that it'll be sent to the Board of Selectmen for approval, and if so approved, for insertion in the warrant. It's a little bit more clear. If we don't approve it, it's not going to be inserted, and they would have to get the signatures.
That's fine. Okay, Article 8, staff. The first two sentences have been removed, so we remain with the town manager shall appoint or hire staff as is necessary, take out that comma, to meet programming, content, and/or operational requirements. The town manager will consult with the PAC and program director for their input prior to making such appointments.
This language is new, actually.
Yes.
That sentence does not currently
Okay,
exist.
so basically, the town manager will appoint staff, and obviously the PAC will be consulted, as it says here, but obviously, no appointed board should have the ability to hire or fire anybody.
And that actually is that existing language is in conflict with the charter and
Yes.
is not how we operate anyway.
Article 9, other provisions. So we have Section 1, establishment of procedures and policies. I think that has not been changed, right? That's
No
unchanged.
change.
My only suggestion on that is that, I was thinking about changing the word may to shall establish policy, but this relates to how they do it.
Right, yeah, and we've already said that they have to,
Yep.
that's their primary goal.
Sorry.
Possible conflict, we talked, that stays unchanged. And then, of course, the last section is added as annual budget. PAC will submit an annual budget to the town manager for inclusion in the annual town meeting warrant. It shall be due when all other town department budgets are required to be submitted by the town manager, either by request and/or charter requirement. Said budget may be fully debated, discussed, and amended at the annual, at annual, I guess. Do we have to submit? It shouldn't be restricted to annual, just any town meeting, right?
Well, it's talking about the annual budget. You can
Yeah,
always amend it
okay,
later.
Sure.
So one thing, the second sentence says, "It shall be due when all other town department budgets are required to be submitted." I think that by should be to the town manager.
Submitted to, yes. Yep, I agree.
And the only suggestion on Section 2, just above it, this is definitely a cut and paste. If any part of these bylaws is in conflict with
Ordinance.
other Lunenburg bylaws, because we don't have ordinances, those are only cities, I would say with other town bylaws, those of the town shall have preference instead of municipality, so it'd be consistent with the language earlier. I don't think we use the word municipal anywhere else. It's a minor change, but
Everybody okay with those?
Yep.
Okay. So we will see the final one of that, and we can vote on that next week, is that correct, when we see the final? Okay.
I'm going to vote on it now,
What?
so Jamie doesn't have to leave the room again.
Oh, okay. It's kind of fun with him out of the room. Okay, so then
I would make a recommendation that we recommend approval based on the changes in discussion tonight.
as amended, okay.
As amended, thank you.
second that?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. And if somebody can summon Mr. Toll,
He's
Can
coming.
leave.
It's a handout.
okay, recommended budget.
So what I would like to do is just take a few minutes to go through the handout that I provided to the Finance Committee last week, and I apologize, I photocopied the one that had my notes on it, so
Good, we get the inside scoop.
you can see what I was thinking. So this is just a quick presentation that I made to the Finance Committee last week. The first slide is projected revenues for fiscal 2015. We have total projected revenues of $32,047,625. 65% of that comes from property tax, 22% from state aid, 8% from local receipts, and 5% from available funds. On the second page, you can see that for fiscal 15, we are expecting a 2.28% increase in revenues, which is $713,456. 692,000 of that, or 3.42%, coming from an increase in property tax, and the reason it's 3.42 and not 2.5 is property taxes go up 2.5%, plus we add in new growth and we add in exempt debt. So that's why it's higher than 2.5%. State aid is going up 5.47%, or about $365,000. Most of this, or all but about $20,000, is coming in additional Chapter 70 education aid. About $20,000 is coming in lottery or the unrestricted general government aid. We will see a decrease of about 2%, or $52,000 in local receipts. About 50 of that is the loss of the Medicare Part D revenue, and the Medicare Part D revenue is the reimbursement we receive from the federal government for providing prescription drug coverage to retirees through our health insurance. As of January 1st, we switched over to retirees receiving prescription drug coverage through Medicare Part D. The savings was about 5 times what the loss was, so it was to our benefit to do that, but we will see a decrease in that revenue. And then we also will see a decrease in available funds of about $290,000, and this is mostly because last year we used a large amount of free cash to supplement our capital budget, and we're not doing that this year, so that's why we have a decrease in available funds. On the third page, projected expenditures, we are projected to expend at this point $31,931,525, which is about $116,000 less than revenue, and we'll talk about that shortly. 49% of that spending will go to education, and that's both Lunenburg Public Schools and Monty Tech. Next, about 15% of the budget will go to employee benefits, the largest being health insurance.
Before you go on, just a quick question. The employee benefits, does that include the school or the non-teacher employees?
No, it doesn't include any active employees for the school.
Okay.
That portion is
Within the school
within
budget?
education.
All right.
So this would be for active employees of the town and retirees of both the town and the school.
Okay.
9% for debt service, 8% for public safety, 6% for public works, and then for administration, land use, and human services, 6%. Non-appropriated, which are our cherry sheet charges, the charges that we receive from the state for services that the state provides us, 5%. Capital improvements, 2%. Stabilization, less than 1%.
Does education in this regard include both Lunenburg Public Schools and Monty Tech?
It does,
Okay.
but it does not include choice or charter. Choice or charter is shown under non-appropriated
Okay.
expenditures.
All right.
And then on the last page, just a recap, again, total revenues of $32,047,000, total expenditures of $31,931,000, leaving $116,100 left to be allocated. I do want to make a note that our Monty Tech assessment, what's proposed in the budget, there's also a one-time charge of $49,244, which is an increase in the fiscal 14 assessment based on a change in the formula. And we were notified by Monty Tech of this change in September or October of this year and told that they would not be looking for that increased appropriation in fiscal 14 because the budgets had been set, but that they would be looking for that one-time adjustment in fiscal 15. If we are able to pay that in fiscal 14, then that $49,244 also becomes available for appropriation. And I think at this point in time, based on the preliminary information I have, I think we can probably cover it in 14, but we would be using all of our free cash, all of our appropriations, under expended appropriation. We'll be using everything. But I think we can do that in fiscal 14 if this board and the Finance Committee is interested in supporting a reserve, not a reserve fund, a free cash supplemental appropriation to cover this, or however we look at it. That would mean that there would be $165,344 left that is unallocated. So the Finance Committee seemed to be, they didn't vote on it, but they seemed to be supportive of trying to take care of that within fiscal 14, even if that meant a supplemental appropriation.
Just a, excuse me, a clarifying question. Does the 49 have to be all in FY 14 or 15, or could it be split if you chose to do that?
Could be split.
Okay.
It doesn't
Thank you.
matter. So there are a number of above target requests that have been submitted, and I've detailed these for you. They're only listed, they're not listed in any priority order. They're only listed in the budgeted items, just in the order they appear in the budget. So the first is the Lane property. As I mentioned, the estimated cost for fiscal 15 just to carry the short-term debt is about $2,500, but then long-term, if it's done over 5 or 10 years, it's $50,625 over 5 years, or $27,000 over 10 years. Second item that was submitted above target is the pavement management plan. There's a request for $800,000. There is $128,000 already included in the recommended budget for fiscal 15, and that would be in addition to the about $400,000 that we receive in Chapter 90 funding from the state. The third item is an above-target request from Lunenburg Public Schools. This is the difference between what I have recommended for the budget and what the superintendent has recommended, and that is, the difference is $450,250. If you listen to the superintendent's presentation at FinCom, you know that there have been some changes in her recommendation since this was submitted in January. I believe they about offset. So I think the delta is still about $450,000. And I would point out that the superintendent's budget doesn't yet take into account any savings in utilities as a result of the net metering credits, and that is $50,000+. So the school committee is meeting tomorrow night. They'll be having discussion about the budget. That's probably something that we should be paying attention to, because they definitely need a little bit of assistance in fiscal 15. The fourth request is from the police department for 3 officers, plus benefits. The benefits are not shown in the department budget, but the cost for the 3 officers is $199,000 plus benefits estimated at just under $42,000. The fifth request is the fire department to provide 24/7 coverage with per diem personnel. This at a cost of $210,000. This would cover 2 EMTs in the station overnight and weekends, so that we could get an ambulance out within a reasonable amount of time. The next is land use director. I requested an increase in the salary, an increase of $12,500, but I would be looking to keep with the commitment I made and reduce legal services rather than look for some of this money, but I did want to put that in there because it's not included in the budget. And then the last item is the street sweeper, which was submitted for capital expenditure but not included in the recommendation, in my recommendation at this point in time, because of the priority that it was given with the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. So just, I made a note, if that were to be included and funded over 5 years, the annual cost would be about $40,500, or over 10 years, about $20,250. So that's what's been submitted for above target requests, and again, we have either $116,000 or $165,000, somewhere in that range, that could be allocated within the budget if you so chose. I'd also, the last thing I want to point out is this budget, we've been successful in putting this budget together because we had a 0% increase in health insurance, followed by a less than 1% increase last year. We can't expect to continue down that road for much longer, so I would caution, I would not recommend against funding any new positions in the budget because I don't know that that is sustainable at this point in time.
I think you would recommend against, right?
What did I say?
You said you would not recommend against, but I
I would not recommend double
Okay.
negative.
I certainly would not recommend not doing that.
Oh, it's April Fool's.
Yeah, you know what I meant.
Well, I think this is a good time in the process because this budget has been presented. The Finance Committee has heard all the department heads, and so we have this area of the budget that, I mean, certainly the whole budget is open for discussion, but we have these areas to discuss among ourselves what we feel may be an appropriate use of what's still left on the table, and especially as it pertains to the 7 items that we see here. Again, but not limit to them unless somebody comes up with something that no one else has heard before. So I want to open it up for discussion about where people feel they see a good use of those funds being used.
Well, first initial reaction is 116,000. You'd almost feel better not appropriating it at all, based on what the town manager said. We're in the best situation we've been in like ever as far as health insurance costs, et cetera. So we're in kind of a, I think the term I'm looking for, it's illusory, the good condition we're in, it seems like. It could all go away. 8% increase in healthcare next year, and boom. I would disagree, however, that, if we're going to spend this money, as I look at the list that's in front of us, the street sweeper, it keeps coming up. It's got a life like I've never seen. I really think that needs to go through the process of capital planning properly. We don't even think we should be talking about it at this point. We have a solution to get through the next year, and I think we need to work with that and live with that. Land use director, reduced legal service, that's a wash, in theory. Lane properties, minimal impact on us this next year. So definitely would want to fund that. As we talk about staffing positions versus, one-time funds, I mean, we have a very large number planned for capital in this budget, 800-something thousand. I can't remember. I think that's, so I'm not saying there's excess spending, but there's higher spending we don't normally have. So if we have to back off something in a year ahead, there's some room there, I think. If we were to spend this money, I think after all the years of hearing from Chief Bourgeois and now Chief Marino, I think our most pressing need is in the police department. And if anything, I think we have an opportunity to at least take a chip out of that need, because we have not done anything with it. I think a few years ago we added an officer.
Right.
That
This was the first time in, I think,
God knows when.
11 years
I mean,
that we
that's-
added an office.
And that was a number of years ago at this point. I can't remember how long ago. It all kind of bleeds.
3 or 4, yeah.
Yeah. So if it was me, and if I was going to spend the money, I think I would want to hire a police officer. Of course, I also want to hear from the Finance Committee when they finish their analysis. And other than that, I don't think I'd spend any of the rest of it.
Anybody else have?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think I agree with a lot of what Mr. Matthews said. Well, however, I think that when we say that this is a very fortunate year, and perhaps we shouldn't plan on that, by the same token, I think that the reduced legal services is an estimate. And I think that it's important that we pay the appropriate salary to get the right level of talent for the land use director so that we can achieve that and maybe even more than that. So I don't know if I'd want to restrict ourselves to say, let's take that off the list. I think I'd rather say let's pay what the market requires us to pay for that position. And if we in fact do save legal fees over and above the estimate, that goes to not spending it the same way. I agree on the sweeper, as I'm sure everybody knows. The only thing on the police department, and I certainly think that Chief Marino has done an excellent job, and you know, I would love to support that, although it does add a fixed cost of salary and benefits going forward. I know there's a couple of potential proposals to be further explored in using local bylaws for fines as opposed to state bylaws, and towing fees and different things like that, and I wonder if we can make them contingent, you know, in terms of, as opposed to funding it up front, trying to find the money during the year in the operating budget and allowing him to use that within his own budget to add officers. That's the only level of specificity I would go beyond with what Mr. Matthews said.
Mr. Chairman, I also support the paying the competitive salary for the land use director, and both in legal expenses and snow and ice, we often go over those due to items that go beyond our control. I know that one member of the Finance Committee talked about what are the costs that are going to hit us next year, and can we build a cushion to that? And I would be hesitant to spend this amount of money almost anywhere, because assuming that the town does buy the Lane property, we'll be having that coming online. At some point, we will be doing something with the street sweeper, whether we outsource or insource or whatever, and the question becomes whether we'll need those funding. You know, picking between the school, fire, and police department is a tough thing to do, and I'm not sure putting money into those budgets now with what we may hit next year would be the right thing to do. I think if we put this money into the reserve fund with the idea of a fall town meeting that we look at, as Mr. Toll talked about, the additional fines that may be coming in, and possibly revisiting additional appropriations at that time, 4 or 5 months into the new fiscal year, seeing where we end the current fiscal year. I'm concerned that we'd have another winter the way we had this year, and I know that as much as is in the budget for the snow and ice is not going to be enough to cover that. So at this point, I wouldn't really recommend expending the funds other than putting it somewhere so that we actually get the cash in and effectively build our free cash for next year.
For myself, I think that some of the items, in concurrence with my colleagues, the purchase of the Lane property, as I said earlier in the meeting, I think it's a once-in-a-lifetime purchase, and the effect on it this year, as illustrated by the town manager, is a very minimal cost in FY15, so I certainly would support that. The land use director, I would agree with all of my fellow selectmen that I think that is an appropriate use of the money. I think in any job description, you really need to pay the appropriate salary to get the proper people. And this is going to be a broadened use up from the planning director. It's a much broader responsibility. I think it's going to require a larger salary. And also, if I may, I mean, in order for the town manager to state, as she has several times, definitively, that almost one for one, the amount of dollars here would reduce the legal expenses, even on our sheet here, she says it. That's a pretty bold statement, and I think that I would, having worked with the town manager for 6 years now, I would certainly think she wouldn't say that if there wasn't a whole lot of data to support it. So that is a wash. As far as the other areas, I certainly would not be able to support any, although I certainly recognize the need for the employees in the police department and the fire requests. I could not support them because this is really not a sustainable, it's certainly not a predictably sustainable number. And that's the problem. I mean, we came to this number because, again, as was noted, we had a 0% health insurance increase, and there is no way we can keep continuing to think that we're going to get that next year. So to hire somebody only to be fighting with funds next year, I don't think is prudent. The pavement management plan, we certainly could use the money there. I don't know what kind, again, it seems like a lot. Let's just say it's the full $165,000. I don't know, that gets us something. But when we're looking at a request of $800,000 a year, I don't know how far that gets you. I don't even know if that gets you a street. So as far as the street sweeper, I think that although I don't land on one side or the other, I certainly can understand the argument about going through the process. It has gone through the process, and it was rejected by the Capital Planning Committee, and I respect that. I'm just concerned that we're left with a machine that may not make it this year, and maybe it will. I think it's a risk factor, and I think that's the balancing act that I kind of find myself in when I evaluate it, is do I think that the machine we have with the $6,000 repairs that the DPW director has presented to make it operable, will that make the machine function for 2 full seasons? If it doesn't, and we have to outsource it, does the cost of the outsourcing cost more than a 10-year payment would be? So I certainly see the argument. I don't think it necessarily should be off the table. I'm also not here fully behind it advocating it. I think it should be something we should discuss. And as a capital item, I think it's something that could be an appropriate use of what's on the table. But those are the only 3 things. 2 of them I think are either negligible with the $2,500 for the Lane property, or a wash with the land use director. So I could see myself potentially supporting the street sweeper. But anything else, I think, is really necessitates a larger view picture and a larger view solution than a one-time chunk of money in this size. I don't think this really justifies us being able to bring on any new people, that's for sure. And what effect it would have on the pavement management plan, I guess I could be convinced one way or another. I'm not really greatly supportive of that.
I appreciate the comments that you've all made. I guess I particularly liked what Selectman Ebersole said about potentially putting the funding in the reserve fund, and then at least how it came through my filter, putting it in the reserve fund, and then maybe taking it up at fall town meeting once we have the proposed ambulance fee schedule settled, the police department, the bylaw fees, the towing fees, those types of things. My concern with going into town meeting with this sitting on the table, it's going to get appropriated somewhere. And I hate saying that out loud, but it's just the reality of what's going to happen. And I think it would be good to have a plan other than let's just not appropriate it.
Well,
I don't think that would be I think anybody here is advocating that note appropriated.
I think that's the statement I left unsaid, was we put it in a reserve fund, because that makes perfect sense.
Sorry, me
It's
being
okay,
the blunt
listen.
person that I am, I have to say these things.
Yeah, I just shrink from blunt people.
I mean, since you're afraid of saying things out loud, I'll say this out loud. I mean, if you put it in the reserve fund, it doesn't become any less of a target than it being unappropriated, presumably. It's just somebody has to be a little more bold and say, I'll take it out of the reserve fund and move it here. So.
I mean, the other thing I would say, too, is that we can revisit the street sweeper in the fall as well. I mean, when there's more information provided on that part. One police officer with benefits would be $47,000, based on dividing that total by this. So there are ways to spend this. I'd be interested to hear from the DPW directors, what would this money buy? That type of a thing. So, but we're so far into the budget process that to do all of that again at this point, I think is too late, and that we would not lose this money. It would be available, and it would be something that we could actually come back to in the fall. And to try to, all of these priorities, or most of these priorities, are valid. They're all valid. So, but we don't have enough money to do it. And nickel and diming by giving more may help somewhat, but I'm not sure whether that's going to help us, and then next year we have to cut.
Exactly, and I think it's the difference between we can use this and think about this as tactical money. It's certainly not strategic money. We can't change a paradigm of how we're doing things in any one of the operations that are here requesting the large numbers and have any long-term effect, because we don't even know if the money's going to be there next year. Which underscores, of course, one of the things, all these these requests that went over the target, many of these were discussed at previous Board of Selectmen meetings during previous budget seasons, most thoroughly probably 2 years ago, when we went over every single item that the town manager put forward as a progressive look at where we are headed and what our real needs are. Not what we're funding, but what our real needs with growing. I think there are very few people, maybe there are some, who don't see the need for a growing police department. If anybody's been following, what's been going on in town and neighboring towns with public safety, I mean, they're getting more frequent. The data coming from the police department and the fire department as well, the data shows clearly that activity is increasing. And we need to appropriate those. And if there was any frustration I've had over the years, it's the fact that what we all agree that we need to move toward, we're always stuck with the same thing, is that there's just not anything going. So we make these strategic plans or vision plans of the 5-year budget projections. And we're always stuck, and I know it's a hard spot, but we're always stuck in a place where we find it hard to address them. So can we include 1 and 6, at least? I think we have a kind of consensus for number 1 and number 6 in your budget.
Okay,
For 15,000.
Right.
For a total of.
all right.
And then the rest, I think we're going to, we certainly can take a wait and see.
I guess I think if we can have a dialogue with the Finance Committee, but I would like to possibly get a sense from this board of whether we hold off on spending any of the additional money and putting it into the reserve fund. Or we hold off that decision until, next Monday. That's when we would have the final, you'd want to have a final vote for the warrant and the budget.
Yeah, and I really need to have everything ready for Thursday, because Thursday is the Finance Committee's last opportunity.
This Thursday.
Yeah, this Thursday.
Again, anything that I would be supportive of using the money for would really have no marketable difference between approving it now or in the fall, because they would be capital expenditures and not employees. So
I guess I just want to make the point again that we have a very large spend in capital this year. Very large. We have a pretty good cushion built in there.
Mhm.
If we had to find $80,000 for a police officer's salary and benefits, we could really easily find it if we reduce capital spending next year by $80,000 as opposed to reducing personnel. But again, that's the only one I'm not even married to at this point. I'm looking at it, and
Mhm.
if this makes the most sense after 9-10 years of these conversations. It's never going to be an easy decision. It's never going to be easy to fund, but at some point, we're going to be so far behind the 8 ball that we may look back and wish we had at least taken a couple of steps along the way. But failing that, I'm fine with putting in reserves if there's no support for it. I certainly don't see anything else I'd want to spend it on, that's for sure.
And I would say that I'm of the same mind of what the town has not done in the pavement management.
Yep.
That we've put a lot of the money out of taking care of the roads into operations, and that's another part where we may need to take that money from capital plan next year and put it towards that plan too.
True.
to your point, Mr. Ebersol, I think I'd like to hear what the FinCom has to say on Thursday, and we can make our final decision on that on next Tuesday, if that's okay with the board.
Sure.
Mhm.
So, one other thing that I wanted to go through on the budget, and there are two separate handouts there, is the projected debt service for the school project. That is not yet included in this budget. We were waiting for the cash flow analysis from the owner's project manager. We finally have that. And this is not going to impact, I mean, this is going to impact taxes, but it's not going to impact the operating budget. So what I have just distributed, two different documents. One says maintain bank qualifications, State House notes, and the other says maintain bank qualifications. So, and the net impact is about the same. A couple of things to understand. Bank qualification, that is important. What bank qualification means is any year that we issue $10 million worth of debt or less, we are able to maintain bank qualification. By maintaining bank qualification, we're issuing tax-exempt notes. Once we go over $10 million, we are issuing taxable notes. So one way that we keep our costs as low as possible is to split the borrowing into $10 million or less chunks. And we are able to do that in this project based on the cash flow analysis in each year except fiscal 16, which is essentially the last year of the financing. And then we have the option either to go through State House notes, which is a mechanism through the Department of Revenue to issue debt. And if we're at $3 million or less, we can be competitive in the State House note program, or we just go through the traditional financing method. And the difference is if we go through the State House note program, our expenses are a little bit less than if we do traditional financing. So if you look at State House notes, which, because ideally we would be using this program to keep our costs as low as possible. In fiscal 15, the estimated tax impact for the average household is $36.43. So pretty minimal in fiscal 15. In fiscal 16, we would be looking at an impact of $146.83, and then in fiscal 17, jumping up to $457.92, and then in fiscal 18, $487.79, which is the high water mark for this. The other alternative is to not use the State House note program. We would be borrowing more early on in the project, and the taxpayer would feel the impact a little earlier, but the overall impact is about the same. So if you go to the second page that just says maintain bank qualification, the fiscal impact in fiscal 15 is $42.92. Again, that's an annual based on the average home. In fiscal 16, $218.05, which is, well, a little less than double than what you saw under the other scenario. And then in fiscal 17, $458.69, topping off in fiscal 18 at $477.50. So the impact, you know, the top point, we're going to get there in the same year, and it's going to be about the same. It's just a matter of whether you get there sooner rather than later. And the debt service that's coming off in those years is pretty minimal. So this is a decision that the board is going to make at the appropriate time. Now is not the appropriate time, but I wanted to let you know, based on the cash flow analysis, we're still projecting the project is going to cost the average taxpayer about what we said it was, or pretty darn close to what we said it was when we went through the presentations. We're still estimating interest rates at 3 3/4, 4 1/4, 5. So we have, reasonable to somewhat conservative interest rates that we're projecting. And it really is a decision the board will need to make about whether or not you want to, how you want to implement the impact. There's definitely a school of thought with these projects that it's easier, people approve a project, it's easier to get the project on the tax bill rather than waiting a couple of years and then people wonder why their tax bill is going up because either they're new to town or they've forgotten about the vote.
Well, one of the things that jumps out at me right away, the difference, and I realize certainly it's over a 25, what is it, 30?
30.
30-year period, that the bank qualification only, not the State House notes, we wind up paying $200,000 more total at the end in your illustration.
Yes, because we're going to market less often.
Right.
And,
Well, $200,000, I mean,
yeah.
it's $200,000, and especially since the rate, the impact to the average homeowner is basically negligible.
It is. It's really in the second year where the
Right.
second year jumps up.
So there's 1 year that's majorly difference, and then everything else for the bulk of the time is either $1 or $9 difference a year.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, my preference as well would be to do this as cost-effective as we are able to do. With the State House Note Program, we are going to market more often than we are under the other program, so it means it's more work on the administrative end, but obviously, this project is going to be a lot of work, and all of our documents are going to be fresh because we're going to be going to market all of the time, so it's not a big deal from that point of view.
any questions about this? Okay. Minutes,
No minutes.
warrants,
This is accounts payable.
accounts payable in the amount of $229,723.45.
Accounts payable.
Another accounts payable in the amount of $25,547.68.
This is accounts payable, and this is the mitigation check, the PEC mitigation checks.
Okay, so this is accounts payable for the PEC mitigation checks that we announced or decided upon last time. $51,405.40.
And this is the payroll.
Payroll in the amount of $622,537.62.
And payroll deductions.
And lastly, payroll deduction in the amount of $262,188.04. Any action files from anybody?
Yes, hoping we can have another conversation perhaps with the planning board. We had a brief discussion at the end of our last meeting, but it wasn't on the agenda, on trying to get to a standardized drainage system
Okay.
for developments in town. The indication was that, as discussed so far, it wasn't possible or legal, but I have to think if we're accepting roadways and we're setting standards for roadways, that we should be able to establish within our standards some sort of standardization, as developed by reviewing engineers, DPW, planning board, et cetera, so that we can minimize our operating costs going forward. So it's just something I think we need to get back on the table and have a further discussion of.
Okay, we will send the invite to the planning board.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Rubisall.
2 items. One, yesterday was the end of the first quarter of the calendar year, the third quarter of the fiscal year, and we said we were going to review our goals every quarter, so that needs to get put on the agenda. And then secondly, just asking for the status of the Secretary of State's investigation. The last time Town Council was contacted was the beginning of March, and they would get back to us with an update, and there's been no update. So just ask that that be done, preferably before town election.
Okay. Also, if we can distribute for the board next Tuesday, the town manager review evaluation sheets for everybody. Because that is coming up, and we're going to want to do that before the election. Committee reports, Board of Health,
No report?
Building Reuse.
Next meeting, April 7th, and we are currently at 8 of 9 members. We'll make a proposal to add a citizen at large, and we're still looking for people who have some background and expertise, want to participate. We have agreed that we can go as high as 11, but 9 fills out our charter.
Excellent. Capital Planning Committee,
No report.
Finance Committee.
They will meet Thursday night at 7 o'clock here.
That's that last
Should be.
televised budget hearing, okay. Library Board of Trustees.
Library Board of Trustees has noted that their utilization is same and stable. Their budget has met their standards for the state. Carrie came to their meeting the last time. They did note that they are still buying books, but there is, as is happening throughout the country, a trend towards e-books. So therefore, they're looking at what they're buying on a regular basis.
Okay. All is out, so no MPO, no planning board. I did attend the planning board's public hearing on the medical marijuana dispensaries, so that was continued. That was some good dialogue, and there was some input from some residents, and they're going to continue that April 14th at their, is that going to be televised? Yes, it will be televised. NOPAC, School Advisory Committee on Acceptance and Diversity.
One of the charges to the committee was to give the school committee a ballpark figure, almost if money was no object, what would we need in money to accomplish on an ongoing basis. Our committee ends at the end of the school year. So I made the presentation based on the committee for programming and speakers, materials, obtaining a grant writer, a stipend as needed, activities, training of staff, including a curriculum program for students, and exchange exercises. All of that could possibly cost as much as $30,000. The goal would be that that would be covered by grants and donations, and possibly some coming out of the school budget based on available funds, and that this would be rolled out after a period of time. Some of those costs, such as purchasing curriculum, would fit into existing operations and would not be an ongoing cost. This is not a done deal by any case. It was information for the committee that they required before they finished their budget process.
Excellent, thank you. School Committee.
Meeting tomorrow night here, will be their budget hearing.
School Building Committee.
No updates.
Sewer Commission.
Sewer Commission is starting a process of utilizing they have the right to inspect properties that are connected to sewer. They're starting for the infiltration and inflow process. They will be using Weston and Sampson for the purposes of inspecting homes to make sure that there are no sump pumps in the property draining into the sewers. And the DPW will work with homeowners to redirect that flow elsewhere. We already talked about the presentations at town meeting, and I know that they'll be more than willing to come and talk to us about the extensions of the sewer. They want to have a workshop with the Board of Health. One of the things that they found as they were talking with various people is the need to help people with their failing septic systems that may be outside the sewer district. They have a vacancy on one member, Jay Simeon, is not running for re-election, so they have a vacancy and no one was nominated at the caucus. And it's my understanding that nobody took out papers for that position. So therefore, there's the opportunity to somebody run by write-in for that. And preferably, we'd have somebody who is a taker of the sewer system, because currently there are people who are in the sewer system district but not currently served by sewer. And then, as was mentioned earlier by the town manager, they did develop their balanced budget with no rate increase, and they'll be bringing that to us.
Excellent. Mass Broadband, I have not received a reply, and I just realized that as I went through my notes, so I will resend the email asking if they had not received it politely, and ask for
They probably
reply.
went through the mass broadband.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, there's a throughput issue. Town manager reports and department updates. All right, no thank you. No other appointments, reappointments, resignations. Our next meeting, April 8th. Any final comment from any members of the board? Any final public comment from the public? Then I would entertain a motion from the board.
So moved?
Second?
Say what the motion is.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Any further discussion? I'm assuming not. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Good night, everyone. See you next Tuesday.
Oh, come on. Was there...